So welcome, our beloved, brilliant colleague, Sarah. We so appreciate your consistent leadership and solidarity. And as always at SETC, we begin all things by acknowledging, giving thanks to our creator. We acknowledge all the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So Sarah, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Sure. Thank you, Victor. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm coming from the Peace and Treaty Mi'kmaq lands. So that's where I'm coming from. So the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And yeah, so, it's amazing being able to be a part of the Northpine Foundation as the impact director for formerly incarcerated persons. We are, one of the most giving foundations in the country, as well as the only one that focuses on formerly incarcerated individuals. So that's huge. It's unheard of, and it's something that I'd like to see more of. So, I came into this position due to my lived experience and the struggles that I've had coming through life and ending up in prison myself. And, to be able to be afforded this opportunity to give back and try and, change the way, not only society and government looks at individuals who have been impacted by the criminal justice system, but also to, find solutions to help people reintegrate successfully and not be caught in that cycle of incarceration. It's an honor, and to have, the most important thing is that I'm trusted by these individuals to be their voice and to stand up and work on their behalf to make these changes, to make everything easier and break down those barriers and that stigma that surrounds them, and have them be successful in who they are and who they can be, and that potential that's so often overlooked and untapped. We've got a wealth of resource within this community with these individuals who are intelligent and bright and have so much potential, and they're so often overlooked because of the fact that they've made some choices in their life for whatever those reasons are. It's really sad to see that society just kind of pushes them aside and whatnot. And one of my big pet peeves is, people get sentenced to prison and their only punishment is that they're removed from society, but yet everyone's okay and advocating and bringing out their pitchforks to deprive them of their human rights. And it's such a fallacy for people to think that somebody who gets sentenced to prison, when that sentence is over, then they can move on with their life. But the reality is, in Canada, these are all life sentences, because you have that stigma, you have that criminal record. There's 3.8 million Canadians who have a criminal record, and a lot of them don't qualify for pardons, especially when judges are giving standalone orders for a restitution that people can't pay back because they can't get a job because they have a criminal record. And, it's the whole system is set up for these people to fail. And we need to change that. We need to start breaking down those barriers. So my work involves going around and making investments financially and non-financially to organizations and people and communities across Canada that are trying to work to break down these barriers and give opportunities to people to be successful. And yeah, so it's just amazing.
That's absolutely incredible. And systemic transformation is hard, challenging, incremental, and daunting work. And yeah, since the first day we met, so we met a while ago now, in terms of your role, not only did your passion come out in our conversation, but just your humanity and the fact that you genuinely care. And I think that that's something that is rare in many ecosystems and sectors. And just, yeah, I just wanted to just, give you your flowers right now, just Yeah, just to say that I really appreciate all that you do for so many, because the work that you're doing and the investments that you're making in the organizations on the front lines of some of this work is very challenging. It's not easy. Like I could tell you, I've worked in that ecosystem. It's not easy at all. So once again, I appreciate all that you do for so many.
Thank you
Question?
so much.
Oh no, thank you, thank you. So my next question: what's inspiring you right now in your work? What has you curious, or what's keeping you up at nights?
Oh, so many things. What's really inspiring is, really seeing the impact and the communities and the bringing people together. I think one of the biggest issues that we have with people and organizations that work with formerly incarcerated or currently incarcerated is that there's no collaboration. Everyone's working in their silos. And it's designed that way. Traditional funding and government funding is designed to keep people working in silos, because united, we're strong and we can make change, and they don't want that. So I think, investing in organizations and then people around them, like in Halifax, that's one thing that we did in the HRM. Is my first investment with Coverdale Justice Society for Caitlin's Place is a bail house for women and gender diverse individuals, and that was in the fall of 2021 that we made that investment. And within 7 months, the Department of Community Services committed to permanent core operational funding, but we also invested in community partners around them for a learning community. And it turned out to be one of the best things that we've ever done, because they all contributed to parts of what was needed to offer those full supports to people and be successful. And I can tell you, if people, I always say that a healthy community isn't one that's free of crime and free of mental illness and free of that. It's a community. A healthy community is one that when they see someone struggling, they wrap around that person and they support that person. And that's what a healthy community is. And my goal is to create those across Canada. And I mean, if the taxpayers listen to all the stigma out there and all the false claims about, safe communities, well, they should know the realities of it. A safe community is what we're creating by supporting these people. The big stigma and the reason why nobody wants to invest in incarcerated or formerly incarcerated people is they think, well, we don't want to give money to criminals. And the thing is, if you're investing in the well-being and the success of these individuals, you are creating safe communities. Putting them in prisons and further victimizing them and oppressing them is creating unsafe communities. They're not getting the help that they need. So we need to change society's views on what that looks like. What keeps me up at night is, seeing these false claims and politicians, especially, with the PC leader just announcing, his false claims about 40 individuals being arrested 6,000 times in Vancouver. So we need to be tough on bail for violent crimes. But, the reality of it is these weren't individuals that were being arrested for violent crimes. And they weren't even all arrests. That was 6,000 points of contact from police. So, the reality is when you're taking information and you're shifting it to serve your own purposes, you're creating unsafe communities, because now you're not addressing the real issues. What you're doing is you're creating panic and you're creating more stigma and you're perpetuating further oppression, further marginalization, further victimization of these individuals. And, it's, there's a lot of things that I've experienced personally throughout my incarceration, violations of human rights and stuff. And, I can openly speak about the fact that I was sexually assaulted by a guard in prison. And of course, right away, it's like, oh, that's criminal. And there's a dozen other victims that came forward. There was people coming forward 7 years prior to me coming forward who it was swept under the rug. And that's the problem too with Correctional Service Canada is, they're so secretive and they keep everything buried. So society doesn't know the realities of what goes on. You know, I was in there because I committed crimes and I was paying my debts to society by being removed from it. But my punishment shouldn't have been being raped by a guard. Nobody deserves that. But yet society, seems to think that that's okay because they deserve this kind of punishment. And that's not the reality of it. And what really, really keeps me up at night is knowing that there's so many more injustices that happen every single day behind bars and in community. And, how can we really make those changes to address those issues and get people, talking about what really matters? These are members of community. And it's funny how a lot of people don't care until it happens to them or someone close to them. Now it's an issue. Well, why isn't it an issue when it's happening to your community member that you don't know? Like we talk about rule of law. Rule of law affects society as a whole. Without rule of law, society suffers. So we need to really address all the issues that surround it. And I'll say, the stigma and the comments that came about my case in particular, oh, they're a criminal, don't worry about it, they deserve that, things like that. Now this person gets sentenced, this guard, and I show up for a sentencing with my victim impact statement. And to me, Northpine, we have a core value of kindness, and that's something I live every day. And for me, showing up with all this resentment and hate would not do myself any good or the perpetrator. So what I did was I showed up with my victim impact statement. I talked about the negative impact it had on me personally, but I ended it with wishing that he would get the help that he needs to better himself. Because now I know he's going into an environment, prison, where he will not get that help because it's not afforded there. And I want him to be a better person so that he can stop harming others. And I told him I forgive him. And I hope he can learn to forgive himself so he can start the healing journey. And just to reference that, I applied to have the publication ban lifted as it pertained to me, which I was successful, and it set a precedence in the Supreme Court moving forward, which is great for victims moving forward. And he was invited by the Crown to that hearing. And his words to the Crown were, I can't go because I'll miss programming and I think it's really working. And after what Sara said, I'm really working hard to do better and change my behaviors. That to me couldn't have come out of hate and anger. It could only come out of love, compassion, and kindness. So if everybody would show a little more kindness and compassion, we could change this country, we can change this world. We just all have to, realize that we're all human beings. We all deserve the same opportunities. We just don't all get them. So what can we do to make those opportunities available to those who are at a disadvantage?
I'm speechless. Thank you so much for your vulnerability, your courage, your tenacity, your resilience, and your incredible compassion, mercy, and grace. And compassion, mercy, and grace are things that are rare in a capitalist colonial society. And just thank you so much for sharing that with us. And just I always think of that quote that speaks about building more prisons to stop crime and violence is like building more cemeteries to stop cancer. And I think that's the fact that you're able to have compassion and grace and mercy for that individual not only speaks to your character and your moral fiber, but also speaks to the change that we need to see in this world. So once again, thank you. I applaud your remarkable leadership and just humanity. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. And I think, one thing I'd like to mention too is with the Coverdale Justice Society, with that investment, it was an investment the first year of $767,000. And in 31 months, they helped 92 women and gender diverse individuals in community as opposed to sitting in prisons, which saved the taxpayers just shy of $5.5 million in 31 months. So tell me that prison is the answer. When are taxpayers going to start seeing that their money is going to the wrong places? Criminalization isn't, formerly incarcerated criminalization is not an underinvested sector. It's overinvested in the wrong places. And so we need to shift people's way of thinking.
I couldn't agree more. There's been so many cost benefit analysis that speak to the fact that criminalization costs the taxpayer in social services, in emergency services, in hospitalization services, in law enforcement. There are so many costs associated with trying to decrease recidivism or reintegration, like when we should be focusing on preventive models, reintegration frameworks, models while folks are in custody, or just investments in the community organizations doing the frontline work, as opposed to finding ways and means to socially isolate members of society that usually are going to come back home at some point. Like this notion that we're locking them up and throwing away the key is not the case at all. And a lot of times folks come back home more traumatized and victimized than when they went in. So
Absolutely.
it's a cyclical pattern, So go ahead.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I do some training for the Halifax Regional Police with their cadets and stuff as well. And so we have a lot of discussions about, things like unrealistic conditions that are placed on people on bail or parole or probation. And, if you take somebody who struggles with mental health illness or struggles from addiction, you can't place unrealistic conditions on them and expect them to be successful. You're setting them up to fail. And the majority of the work that police do are on these breaches. You'll see someone go into court for 3 charges and they got 27 breaches. You can't take somebody who suffers from addiction and says, if you ever use again, you're going to be punished. No, what we need to do is provide the supports to help them navigate their addiction and be able to succeed in their recovery. And that's not what we're doing.
I couldn't agree more. And I've seen it firsthand. There was a young man that I worked with many years ago. He committed suicide after a breach. And the only person in his life that was supporting him was his grandmother. And he was breached twice for visiting his grandmother because he wasn't allowed in that building because one of his co-defendants was in that building. So that was an unrealistic goal because his grandmother was the only person in his life that actually cared about him, that he felt cared about him.
Yeah.
And this is a young man that was brilliant. So once again, when we talk about systems and systemic transformation, systems should not be designed to crush people. Systems should not be designed to do more harm than good. And I think that once again, I just applaud your leadership in this space because there's a lot of work to be done. And yeah, folks like yourself, especially folks with lived experience and understand, they're operating from a place as a credible messenger. I mean, I have no issue with some of the remarkable thought leaders in the space, but the practitioners and the folks with lived experiences play a vital role in this ecosystem. Vital role. Yeah.
Absolutely. I really think that's something like, we were discussing earlier about when I met with the former minister, Bill Blair, former Minister of Public Safety, about consult on, how to reduce or eliminate the fees to a pardon. And then my conversations when I was invited to meet with former Minister Margot Mendocino on future pardon legislation. And I think this needs to be done more. These people in leadership roles, these people who are creating these bills and this legislature need to be taking first-hand knowledge from people with lived experience to help them design these new policies and what really can work. And I applaud the ones that do reach out and do that, but there's so many that don't. And that's how they miss out on the big picture. And I know my dearest friend in the world, Senator Kim Pate, has always told me, it's all about the big picture. You can't be short-sighted when you try and make change, because you can create more harm than good. And a good example of that is, when I was inside and sexually assaulted by that guard, the commissioner directives for the policies that Correctional Service Canada has to abide by, section 577 pertains to women in prisons, and section 2B was the institutional head's responsibilities. And at that time, it stated that the institutional head would notify local authorities upon hearing allegations of sexual assault or misconduct as he deemed necessary. Which of course didn't happen. Senator Pate was the one who called the police on my behalf 3 months after I came forward, because Correctional Service Canada was saying that they already did, which they didn't. They were lying to her. And so immediately they changed that policy to save face in the public, and they changed it to any person, whether a volunteer, contractor, subcontractor, staff, administrator, anybody hearing allegations of sexual misconduct or assault must immediately notify local authorities. Well, on the surface, that looks like a wonderful thing. But when you take into account these victims that are sitting inside prisons who have issues with authority and have been victims of police brutality and, discrimination and racism and being targeted, the last thing they want to do is trust a police officer to help them. So here we are creating now a system where they're forced into communicating and coming forward with authority. So I think, the better plan and the more, bigger picture would have been to say, give them the opportunity to be able to reach out to the authorities as they deem fit, not the institutional head, not the staff, as them as a victim. Why is the victim always the one that seems to be on trial and seems to be punished as well? If you look at the way victims are treated in court, you've got the person who's accused of these gender-based violence, sexual assaults, things like that. And you get the victim, you put them on the stand, you dig up their whole past, you treat them like they're horrible individuals. You treat them like they're on trial. Why is it so backwards? Why is the victim the one that has to defend themselves against the perpetrator?
I couldn't agree more. And I feel, once again, it's advocates and leaders like yourself that are going to make these changes. Like, even the names you mentioned brings me down memory lane. I remember, I don't even know, Ivan Zinger, the correctional investigator, Howard Sapers, all these folks. I remember Bill Blair being remarkably fair in terms of my interactions with him. And yeah, but this was before he was an MP, when he was the chief of police in Toronto. And definitely, I remember Mendocino being very open to my colleagues at YACE and other organizations, grassroots organizations, working diligently to create better public safety. But I couldn't agree more with you in terms of the changes that need to be done from a top-down approach. And the fact that once again, giving folks their flowers while they're here to receive it. Senator Kate, like she should not have had to make that phone call 3 months later. And that's a systemic challenge. That is a structural barrier. And until folks like yourself are positioned, well, and currently you are, to make investments, but not just investments, to actually play a role in terms of decision-making, policy development, policy interventions. We're gonna have a system that deprives people of their basic human rights, and that leads to strife, contention, and not the society that I don't think anyone wants to live in. I mean, so I couldn't agree more. My next question: do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work, like some key specific priorities?
Well, there's a couple things that I'm working on to try and break down those barriers, and so I can probably speak on a couple of them. Obviously, main priority is getting people to recognize that community is the answer. So that's obviously a big priority. But also, one of my our investments in the Mount St. Vincent University's prison education program that was designed by Dr. L. Jones, one of my dearest friends that I've known longer. than anyone through incarceration. Um, you know, it's breaking down those barriers to education. And so what are some more policies we need to change? Well, back in the early 2000s, they removed internet access from the prisons because they were trying to mitigate risk of people trying to organize escapes or contraband or whatever. But since then, there's been so much technology that's come into play and so many programs that can, block access to certain things. So why have we not changed these policies to allow internet back into the prisons for educational purposes? That's a big thing that I'm working on. So I've been working on that. So as it is right now, the funding for what we've given is it's so tedious, and there's so much that goes into it. And I commend Dr. L. Jones and the students that she works with, because they have to take all the programs, the degree programs that they're offering, and which is anything that anyone asks for, and transform them all to fully offline. Because right now you can't get an education fully offline. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. And it's a lot of phone calls and mailing things back and forth. And, you have a family member of the person incarcerated on the phone holding, and L on the other end and listening to lectures and things like that. And, transcribing, assignments and stuff. So, so that's one of the things that I'm working on, is breaking down those barriers. And Mount St. Vincent University, I believe, is the best place to start. And I chose them because they were the first ones to have tuition waivers for the youth exiting the child welfare system. And so I approached the president and said, we need to have this for formerly incarcerated people. We need to have tuition waivers. So that's another thing that we're working on. So I got together with these community stakeholders, these organizations that I fund within the community that provide services like peer mentoring, pardon services, mental health services, trauma therapy, addiction services, all of these things, health services. And we're all getting together to design what that admissions looks like, and those supports that surround being able to make this a successful thing for people with, criminal records, and people who can transition from inside incarceration and continuously, you know, continue their studies into community without interruption. I think that's huge. So that's one of the big things I'm working on right now that I'm very excited about. It's been a dream of mine for about 2 years now. And so it's finally coming into fruition, and it's exciting to see, because that's going to break down a lot of barriers. But again, it references back to that, we are giving people life sentences. Like, I spent 5 years on an 8-year sentence inside. I was out on parole for just over 3 years. And, I did a lot within that 3 years because I wanted to first prove to everyone who is struggling that it's possible, but also, to position myself in a place where I can have that privilege and that power and strength behind my voice. Because when I say something, I've lived it. Like, I came out on parole, I didn't have a single breach or anything, not even a warning. I bought a house. The closing date on my house was the day before my warrant expiry when my sentence ended, things like that. I've been working in community. I've been volunteering. I've been on several boards and committees. I've changed policies. I've given standing testimony in the Senate. I was introduced in the Senate a couple of years ago. All these wonderful things and this work that I'm doing, and yet I don't qualify for a pardon. So I'm going to have that stigma and those barriers for the rest of my life, because, it doesn't matter how good I'm doing or what I've done to change my life and change those maladaptive behaviors that I was taught to survive as a child who was born into an abusive household with a father who not only sexually abused me, but sold me to other men growing up in the trafficking industry. And, all these things that led me to my offense path, I've overcome, and I've changed my ways, and I've given back, and I work so hard. And yet I'm always going to have that life sentence of having that criminal record held over me. So how is that giving anyone the ability to change their lives and move on? It's an everyday battle just to try and prove yourself And it shouldn't be that way. My work, my commitment to my community, and everything should speak for itself. But yet I'll always have that held over me. But I'm actually going to try and apply for clemency at some point. So let's see if that works.
Clemency will definitely work, and I know that we can mobilize letters from across the world, let alone across the country. And yeah, I just once again appreciate your candor and your leadership. One of my big bro, one of my mentors for years, Devon Jones, from Yates. He always
I invest in them. I love
yeah,
Devon.
yeah, that's incredible. That's my beloved brother. You're one of my mentors. From a very young age, he's always telling me about the prison industrial complex and the school to prison pipeline. And once again, like you said before, these sentences are life sentences, And I couldn't agree more with you. Like, we have to change these systems. If not for us, for the society we want our children to be raised with. So once again, I just applaud your remarkable leadership, your candor, and your resilience. You know what I mean? Like, so many, I feel like you're speaking for so many people that are voiceless. You know what I mean? This conversation, and aren't empowered with a platform or with a position or a role to invest and make impact. And it's remarkable the way you're using that power. Because they always say, the power corrupts, you know what I mean? The best, you know what I mean? And you've used, I've seen from, I think we probably met on like your first day at your role. Like, it was literally like day one. This is years ago when you first started at Northpine, a couple years ago. And like, I've just seen the investments that you've made. I've seen the decisions you've made. I've seen the integrity you've walked with consistently in terms of engaging community members. And yeah, it's inspired by your tenacity and everything that you do for so many. Like, I really applaud you. So this is my second last question. What is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
Uh, I'll tell you, working within this sector and with the community that we have, I think the biggest success indicator would be if we're not needed anymore. That's the greatest success, which uh is a pipe dream. It's something I don't believe could ever be achieved in my lifetime, but I'll definitely put my 1000% into it every single day with what I do. Um, on a personal level, I think, I've watched so many people fall through the cracks, and trying to, recognize what those gaps in the system are and address those gaps, and, and I'm a huge, huge believer in collaboration, and, trying to break down those silos and get people to stop competing with each other over those breadcrumbs that are scattered across in terms of traditional funding and granting. We shouldn't be competing with that. We should be working together. If I'm really good at one thing, I shouldn't try and take on 20 other things just so I can monopolize the industry. What I need to be doing is reaching out to people who are good at those other things and working with them and sharing in that, and doing joint submissions and whatnot. So these are things that, I truly believe in wholeheartedly, and things that I try and work towards. Those are successes when people start working together, when communities start, you know, um, thinking in terms of what can we do to support each other as opposed to bring each other down. Those are successes. And successes are when people, like, a lot of people look at me coming out of incarceration and all that I've done, and they think that everybody should be like me. Like, why is not everybody like Sara when they come out? Well, because they're not given, like, yes, granted, I worked hard to get where I am. I built networks inside and stuff like that. But it's those networks that I built and the support of those people that gave me the courage and the strength and the belief in myself that this is possible. And it's not like I don't struggle still. I still struggle. But what I'd love to see is, seeing everybody being afforded the opportunity to build these networks and these supports so that they can thrive and be supported in everything they do. Quite often, what you see is people are incarcerated, they're taken away from their supports and their communities that, they might have one individual community, or they might have 20 that support them. But yet, they have to go, if they have a residency clause where they have to be in a halfway house, they're put in a new community with nobody. So how are they supposed to succeed when they don't have the support of the people that help them realize their worth and help lift them up and help them to um, just be there so these are indicators of success is that we can start collaborating and building communities and changing society's views on what criminalization really looks like and what it is and the realities of what actually goes on. Um, you know, and you see it all the time. You'll see press releases about, this individual was charged with this, and then you see the comments, and it really is society with their pitchforks. That's what it is. All I keep thinking is the song Witch Hunt from Rush. Rush is my favorite band in the world. And you see witch hunt, ignorance and prejudice. When can we start addressing those issues and eliminating those things so that people can start thinking of themselves as part of a community and not a mob out for blood? So yeah, so many things.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I know that song, and I couldn't agree more in terms of the pitchfork piece. I feel like we can do better and we should do better as a society. And if we don't, we're not going to leave this space a better place for our children and our children's children. So once again, I appreciate your leadership as always. Any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and viewers?
I really think people, if you're listening to this, and I wrote this in an article way back in 2020 after I was first released, and I said, what can I do today to make a difference? What can I do every day? If every individual out there said, what can I do to, make a difference? Well, I truly believe that kindness and compassion and empathy is three things that'll really make change, and getting rid of that judgmental attitude and that view that, everything's so black and white. There's so much gray area. Start looking at the gray area because it's not all black and white. And I learned that inside is, like I'd sit there and you'd see the people who are in for crimes against children and things like that. And of course, inside they have their own little mob mentality. And it's like, all this hate and all it, you're in there for something too. And who am I? This is what I believe. Who am I to judge someone for something they did when I don't know where they were at in their journey to do those things? And it's none of my business anyways. Start looking within. It doesn't matter to me what anybody else has done. What matters to me is what I can do. And if everybody would take on that attitude and start thinking of what I can do to change a piece of me to make the world better and focus on that as opposed to what everyone else does, that's deflection. People are deflecting from their own faults and their own inability to succeed by putting the focus on what other people are not doing up to their standards. Well, your standards don't mean anything to me. My standards mean something to me. And I'll keep living with those values and those morals that I hold dearly. And everybody should find their own and start doing that.
Thank you so much, Sara. I so appreciate your leadership, for you being willing to invest some time with us today. And as always at SETC, we close the conversation the way we began, by giving thanks and acknowledging our Creator, by giving thanks and acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassionate compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, Sara. I so appreciate you.
Thank you, Victor. And I just want to also give thanks for, every individual out there who has been impacted by the criminal justice system, for allowing me and the privilege and the honor and the opportunity to be their voice and work towards making their lives better. And I also really want to give, so much thanks for the Northpine Foundation, for John and Kathy and Atif for having the you know, looking at me as a worthy candidate to take on this role and affording me this opportunity to do the work that I do, because without them and their vision for a better Canada, and, you know, for recognizing that this is a sector that deserves to be looked at and focused on, you know, I couldn't thank them enough for this opportunity. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity that has been given to me, and I'm just so blessed, and I can't ever show my gratitude enough for them and, you know, but most importantly, the people I serve.
Indeed, indeed. That's remarkable. Thank you so much for that and sharing that love and appreciation, because gratitude is one of the most important sentiments that we can have on a daily basis. We give thanks.
Thank you so much.